Once upon a time, many, many years ago, there were some wonderful stories known as fairy tales. They were told to generations of children who grew up and told them to their children, who then went on and told them to their children. So they were passed on and on through the centuries. The stories were so popular and had such important things to say that, as if by magic, versions of them appeared all over the world. And elements from these traditional tales can still be found in the books, films, plays, ballets, television and computer games that we enjoy today.
And once again the probing lateral brain of Jonathan Creek had pierced the veil of darkness, restoring reason to another seemingly impossible mystery.
Look at me. I know what you want, Dinah. Trust me.
What you do? Let's just have a look at them scores, shall we? Right? Scores. I'll win. You lose.
Now, according to the fairy tale, if I put these slippers on and they fit, then a handsome prince will come and I'll live happily ever after. Yeah, right. You see, as I thought, the magic in fairy tales doesn't often happen in real life. Ooh, I'm certainly not going to try kissing that. The goody-goody heroine waiting to be rescued by a handsome prince is a typical fairy tale plot, but there are a lot of other common ingredients. Fairy tales are usually set in faraway places. They have simple plots, which invariably include fantastic or magical incidents. They often feature royal characters, like kings and queens, and magical beings, like fairies, witches, wizards, or genies. Each character tends to be a recognisable type with a specific role. Some of the most widely used ones are a hero or victim at the centre of the tale, like Jack or Red Riding Hood. A villain who poses a threat, like the wicked Queen Snow White. A princess, or sought-after person, like Rapunzel, or the Sleeping Beauty. A helper, often a good friend or creature who tries to help the hero or princess, like Buttons or Dandini in Cinderella. And a provider, like a fairy godmother or good spirit, who can sometimes perform magic or bestow gifts to help the hero or victim. Oh, the work of a poor Owen who's fallen on hard times. Never done. Now, shall I stay here and wait for me prince? Or shall I plant these 5 magic beans? Or shall I go for a walk on my own in the woods? Or thread up that old spinning wheel? Shall I eat the shiny red apple? Or let all my hair down? Because I know my fairy tales, I can predict what will happen with whichever decision I make. And they're all a bit far-fetched. Strangely enough, the more bizarre fairy tale elements are often the ones that we enjoy the most and remember best. They've certainly influenced many modern children's authors.
Fairy tales have had a big influence on the way I write. Not especially big influence, not more than the films I've enjoyed or the great literary novels I've read, but equal with them.
Fairy stories are such a wealth of ideas, and you can get so many things from them. And I obviously, subconsciously and consciously, will try and use some of those ideas and subvert them in my own writing.
Cinderella, I still think, is the kind of prototype story in all sorts of ways, although interestingly it doesn't have the terror or the witches, but it is about injustice in such a powerful way that it makes it a very enduring story.
Fairy stories and mythical tales and traditional tales are all asking the same kind of questions, and they've all got universal themes which are relevant to modern readers today.
In Julie and Me and Michael Owen Makes Three, I take a prince, but he's not a conventional prince. He's not the handsome prince with blue eyes and chiselled features. He's somebody who looks like Chris Evans, ginger hair, skinny, pasty face, but inside he is a prince, and he's pursuing a girl that in every way is a princess. And finally his dignity, his decency as a human being emerges, and he becomes the prince that's always been his potential.
There's a beautiful, logical, simple, clear structure to the great fairy tales, which has never been surpassed. And I love that. I love reading the simplicity of them, the clarity of the language, the obvious logic of the sequence of events. Even when they're fantastical events, as they sometimes are, there's a logic there, there's a clarity there, and I love that.
I've decided to have a makeover. Well, that's far more useful than coaching horses in this day and age. Just because I'm Cinderella doesn't mean I have to be stuck in those old fairy tale conventions. Yes, I'm leaving the woods and heading for the city. And who needs a fairy godmother when you have a mobile phone? And a laptop is far more useful than a tired old magic wand. Wait a minute. Well, why am I just changing the conventions? Why don't I just leave the genre altogether? A great idea. I'm going to get out of the fairy tale genre and move into crime and mystery instead. Just call me Agent Cinders, private eye extraordinaire and international spy.
Coming soon to a cinema near you, Tom Thumb, a short film.
If I was going to rewrite a fairy story, I would simply put it into the ordinary, everyday world. And say if I took a story like Little Red Riding Hood, I would set it in somewhere in Newcastle, somewhere near where I live. I would have Little Red Riding Hood living in an ordinary house with an ordinary family. And where's the forest? Oh, the forest is the park just across the street. So in order to go through the forest, she has to go through the park. She's probably going to see her grandma who lives in another street, a few streets away. But in order to see her grandma, she has to go through the park. And if you do that, then you think, well, I can't have a wolf, so what can I have? So you think, oh, well, maybe there's that terrible dog that lives down at number 97, or there's that guy who always looks really suspicious. So it's just taking those elements of the story and putting them into an ordinary world. And what happens with that kind of thing, I think, is you get this kind of mixture of ordinariness and extraordinariness, which is the two things together are the things that make powerful stories.
If you change the events of the story, you change it in a more fundamental way. For example, if you had a fairy godmother figure who arrived not to help Cinderella but to prevent her from going to the ball, that would be a radical change, a different sort of structure to the story, and a very interesting one now I think of it. I might actually write it.
With the happy ever after endings, which frequently end in the characters getting great riches or getting married or whatever, when you think about it, that's only the beginning of a story, isn't it? And perhaps it might be fun to go back and find out what happened next to all these different characters.
Maybe I'd take something like Little Red Riding Hood and make the big bad wolf into a serial killer who's stalking the urban jungle or something like that. Or maybe Rumpelstiltskin could be done as a cowboy and western type of story. He's the man with no name that rides into town to rescue the princess, but unfortunately the princess finds out he has got a name after all, so it doesn't end quite the way he planned it.
From the farthest reaches of the galaxy came Prince Vigo for the love of Princess Lavinia. Frog Princess. Life would never be the same again.
Now I'm Sheriff Cinders of the Old Wild West, and I'm changing genre and convention all over again. I'm a law woman, preaching peace and harmony, and I ain't carrying no gun. It's good fun putting well-known characters into different genres, and they can feature in all sorts of writing, even poetry.
My dumbstruck dad's in love again. The kitchen's falling apart as I mop up the fag ash floor, and grey as ash lies my heart. My stepmom's a lottery holic, gambling all goodness away. We live a life of pumpkin stew, with bills for afters each day. My stepsisters hang out after dark, two puffed up smoke rings of fear, as circles of hate slip out of their mouths. Where is my dead mother dear? I'd love to go to the party downtown, but what would I have to wear? For I live in the land of hand-me-down and only dream of great gear. But look at this get-up, bright as a match, hidden in my mother's chest. Now dressed like a burning ember, the boys make a beeline, impressed. My stepsisters are flabbergasted as I smooch with a lad from year 10. Their eyes like smouldering cinders as he kisses me yet again. 'Twas midnight and my prince was slobbering all over his latest recruit. Drunk as a lord, oh what a drag. In the end, I gave him the boot.
I work as a storyteller and a poet, and I wanted to write a piece that combined the two. And I know Cinderella is a lovely story, but very out of date, so I thought, okay, let's modernise this. And Cinderella's original name in the Grimm fairy tales is Ashputtel, and I thought, well, ash, that's an interesting word. And Cinderella always seems to be dressed in rags, always seems to be grey. And I thought, what's modern, what's grey? Fags, cigarettes. It's a kind of horrible image, but somehow it worked well into the metaphor for the whole piece. Of course, she ends up stubbing out the prince at the end. I do find it strange that some people think a poem just appears, you just write down what you're thinking and feeling and that's it. Actually, no, a poem requires good craftedness, and that comes through the use of simile, metaphor, developed images, which is called conceit, where you have the same metaphor running throughout the poem.
My stepsisters hang out after dark, two puffed up smoke rings of fear, as circles of hate slip out of their mouths. Where is my dead mother dear?
I chose to write this story in a ballad because ballads are often used to tell stories. The word ballad comes from the Latin ballare, which means to dance. And the rhythm is often very strong. It's in quatrains of 4 lines going like this. Di-dum, 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 di-dum. And that strong rhythm enables you to get a point across, to tell a story. The pauses create drama or can be pauses for comic effect. So timing is everything in a poem. It's not just what's on the page, it's how it leaps off like a salmon and comes to life in this kind of river of words.
Drunk as a lord? Oh, what a drag.
I was looking for some very modern words, and also a lot of wordplay. So, for instance, at the end of the poem, it says, drunk as a lord. This guy who's all over the girl, Cinderella, he's drunk as a lord. And that's a phrase, but of course in the original story he's a prince, so drunk as a lord fits quite well. What a drag. Well, drag is a fag, is a cigarette, but what a drag, it has that meaning as well. So I like to play on the meanings of words.
My stepsisters are flabbergasted.
Flabbergasted seemed perfect, because they're both flabbergasted, but they're obviously not very pretty.
My stepmom's a lottery-holic.
Of course, because I'm trying to update the Cinderella myth. I was thinking, well, who could this stepmother be? What would she be into? She'd be greedy for money. She'd be into the lottery. You know, being an alcoholic would be a bit of an obvious thing. So, of course, instead of alcoholic, lottery-holic. It's that sense of addiction to things. Poetry does not have to be dull. You can write about all sorts of things. It's the reason why me and my wife wrote Poems with Attitude, this teenage collection, because we realised there weren't poems out there about all those sorts of issues that I experienced and she experienced as a teenager. You can write about anything. It's relevant to you. It doesn't just have to be swaying trees. I have written another poem with a fairy tale theme, but wanted this to be much harder hitting, so I used very short lines, very punctuated rhythm. It's definitely a performance poem. And what I was looking at was the way that fairy tales have been changed by the forces that be, the forces in television and movies. We must have happy endings, said Walt Disney. That was a famous statement of his. And I was thinking, well, no, the original folk tales were much darker, much deeper. And all you've got to do is look at life around you, and the comparison is very real. Peck those eyes out, cut off the heel. Such grim tales reflected the real. Cut open the wolf, fill him with stones. Here the handless miller's daughter moans. Her stumps are bleeding into the pool. Protect our children, this is too cruel. Happy ends, prioritise, censor violence, sanitize. So said Walt, Mr. Apple Pie. It's all his fault films are cutie pie. But in the park, behind the shed, listen with care to what is said. Wolfish bullies are alive and well, not just hidden in a fairy spell. Read the paper, nothing changed. Real life is more deranged. Snow White's mum, in her red-hot shoes, join Amnesty and listen to the news.
Some of the plots and storylines in fairy tales seem completely implausible, while others can ring true. Look how the headlines use language associated with fairy tales. There have been plenty of real-life rags-to-riches stories over the years, but the life of a girl called Adeline Yen Ma, brought up in China in the 1940s and 50s, really did resemble that of the fairy tale Cinderella character, especially when she was a child. Adeline's family considered her to be bad luck because her mother died giving birth to her. Then, when her father remarried, things went from bad to worse. Her stepmother, Nyang, was certainly as cruel as any wicked stepmother from a fairy tale.
There was a knock at the door, and our son came in at once without waiting, looking flustered and fearful. "A crowd of your little friends is downstairs in the living room. They're asking for you." Her words were like a thunderbolt in a clear blue sky. I stared at her, dumbfounded. "Is my mother at home?" "I'm afraid she is. And so is your father." "Tell my friends I'm not home. Please send them away." "I tried, but they know you're here. Apparently they followed you home from school and saw you enter the door. They want to give you a surprise celebration party for winning the election for class president. Everyone has brought a gift. They mean well. I know." I felt panic-stricken, but had no choice but to follow our son into the parlour. As I crept downstairs, I could hear the giggles and screams of my classmates resounding through the entire house. I bit my lower lip and forced myself to go in to greet my friends. They surrounded me, shouting, "Surprise! Congratulations! Victory!" They were singing and chanting slogans, drunk with euphoria and excitement. No one seemed to notice my tongue-tied silence. I shifted my eyes from meeting anyone else's, afraid that my secret home life was about to be exposed. Inside, I was quaking with terror, hoping against hope that Niang would leave us alone until I could politely ask my friends to leave. Our son reappeared and touched me on my arm. "Your mother wishes to see you now." I fought against the panic surging from within and forced a stiff smile on my face. "I wonder what she wants. Excuse me for a moment." My mind was blank as I knocked on the door of the Holy of Holies. My parents stood side by side. I stood in front of them, with my head hanging, and my eyes fixed on Niang's red silk slippers. I could hear the gleeful squeals of a dozen merry 10-year-old girls echoing through the entire house. "Who are these little hooligans making such a racket in the living room downstairs?" "They're my friends from school." "What are they doing here?" "They came to celebrate my winning the election for class president." "Is this party your idea?" "No, Niang. They came of their own accord. I didn't know anything about it." "Come here!" I approached her gingerly, trembling with terror. She slapped my face so hard I almost fell. "Liar! You planned it, didn't you? To show off our house to your penniless classmates?" "No, I didn't." Tears streaked down my cheeks. I found it hard to breathe. "What insolence to invite them here into our living room and make such a racket!" "I didn't ask them here. They know I'm not allowed to go to their house after school, so they decided to visit me instead." She slapped me with the back of her hand against my other cheek. "Show off! Go downstairs this minute and tell them to get out. They are not welcome." As I hesitated and shuffled my feet, she hit my face yet again. "Do you hear me? I want them out of this house this minute. Are you deaf? Tell them never to come back. Never, never, never!"
Adeline Yenma's book is a true story, but the title, Chinese Cinderella, makes an obvious comparison between her life and that of the well-known fairy tale heroine. It's a piece of factual writing, but her true life story was so dramatic that it almost resembles a piece of fiction. The plots and characters in fairy tales are popular and famous. They keep being altered and updated for modern stories and other kinds of writing. You can choose well-known story conventions and place them in an entirely different setting or genre. You can rewrite well-known tales as brand new stories, or try a different writing form, like poetry. Fairy tales can also be rewritten using a factual writing style, like Adeline Yenma's autobiography. Well, here I am, back as Cinderella, working hard in pantomime.
Oh, no, you're not.
Oh, yes, I am. Actually, I'm waiting to be discovered by some big Hollywood producer who's going to make me into a star. And then I'll have a big house and everything I've ever wanted. My own true rags to riches story. And I'll live happily ever after. Okay. I know I'm getting carried away in my fairy tale imagination. But I can dream, can't I?